Good morning, Shalom Lekulam. I'm happy to see that the number of participants, again, I can see the numbers is growing, but we will start on time. תודה רבה לכם לכולם, שלום לכולכם, תודה שהצטרפתם למפגש שלנו. Thank you for joining us to the opening session for our webinar dedicated to contemporary migration studies. If you want to hear in English or in Hebrew, when the discussion is held in Hebrew or English, please press on the globe on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can see here on my slide and choose the language channel of your choice. אם אתם רוצים לשמוע בעברית או באנגלית, כפי שאתם יכולים לראות בסלייד, תלחצו על כפתור הגלובוס ותבחרו בשפה המתאימה. Both languages, Hebrew and English, are available in our meeting, and you can write questions in the chat in both languages. Thank you to Judith Rubanovsky-Pass on our simultaneous translator. ותודה ליהודית רובנובסקי פס עבור התרגום הסימולטני. Please, can you hear me? Is it okay? Now you can see, all of you can hear me, yes? And about translation. And for those who do not know me, my name is Chachashvili-Bolotin. I'm the head of the Institute for Immigration and Social Integration at the European Academic Center. And as most of us know, every year on 18th December, the world marks International Migration Day, a day set aside to recognize the important contribution of migrants while highlighting the challenges they face. And in this context, I would like to say, to emphasize two goals of our institutes. The first one is to be a think tank and a hub for innovative, groundbreaking research and its dissemination in the public. And the second one is to try to integrate theory and practice. And today's meeting addresses both these goals. As maybe you can see here, we have participants from different countries: Germany, Poland, Ukraine, England, Russia, and of course, Israel. And we have other participants from different academic institutes, ministries, and organizations. Thank you to all of you for coming today. And now let me share with you our schedule. I think you can see here. And now let me move to this slide. As you can see, we have a very interesting schedule, and the opening session will be dedicated to decision-making process among refugees. Due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, this issue is especially important. And today, as you can see here from our program, we have two keynote speakers, Professor Irena Kogan and Professor Karine Amit, sorry. And honestly, I don't want to take time from them. So let's start with Professor Irena Kogan. Irena Kogan, let me introduce briefly Irena Kogan. Irena Kogan is a professor of comparative sociology at the University of Mannheim and the director of Mannheimer Center for European Social Research. Her research is in the area of migration, ethnic and social inequality, and school-to-work transition. In her work, Irena Kogan largely relies on quantitative research methods and survey data. And I also want to add, and sorry, Irena, without permission from Professor Irena Kogan, that she is one of the top sociologists in the world And since 2009, she is an elected fellow of the European Academy of Sociology. And Professor Kogan, the Zoom floor is yours. Thank you for joining us. And I'm stopping my sharing. And please, the floor is yours, Professor Kogan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Svetlana. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having an opportunity to present some results of our study. And I'm trying to share my screen. I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Many thanks again. I would start presenting the results of our survey called 1UA, which was carried out, actually, which idea appeared immediately after the start of the Russian war, but which was realized somewhat later. And I will talk about migration and destination choices of Ukrainian refugees, asking a question to what extent these choices are a coincidence or indeed a rational decision-making. This is a joint work with my colleagues who also participated or initiated the survey. These are Frank van Tubergen from University of Utrecht, Yulia Kosakova from IAB, and Stefan Pötschke from Gezes Institute in Germany. Okay, let me start with reminding you that a full-scale Russian war against Ukraine, which started on 24th of February this year, caused the largest refugee wave in Europe since the Second World War. The countries neighboring Ukraine, which are shown on this map, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova, received the largest share of Ukrainians while those were leaving the country. Some numbers which is actually updated right now.
יש כאן נתונים מעודכנים להיום, מפני ש...
Migration from Ukraine is very dynamic. So here on this, in this table, you see a list of countries where the first 5 countries are these neighboring countries. And I leave out Belarus and Russia, where you also find some refugees, but the numbers are not very reliable. And besides, we have a lot of deportations. So I will leave these 2 countries out and will focus only on the countries neighboring Ukraine to the west. So you see here 2 columns. I will start with the second one, border crossings. So these numbers indicate the numbers of border crossings from Ukraine. Obviously, there are also some movements in the opposite direction, but let us focus now on the border crossings. You see huge number of border crossings from Ukraine to Poland. So basically, Poland took the largest numbers, the biggest numbers from Ukrainian refugees, and remained a key country which resettled refugees. So the second column, refugees recorded, indicates the number of those who received some protection status in the country. We also see quite some numbers of refugees crossing in Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, but also tiny Moldova. And in the second figure, we see numbers of refugees who received this status. And here we already see some other players, some other countries which also received considerable numbers of refugees, among them Germany with over 1 million of refugees, Czech Republic, again, a rather small country with almost 500,000 refugees, and some other Western countries. So this is some information, some indication what we are talking about, what countries what we are talking about, and what numbers are we facing here. So what will be my talk about? What is our contribution? In our contribution, we will try first to compare the socio-demographic profiles of stayers, internally displaced persons, which is people who changed their residence within Ukraine, and refugees from Ukraine. By doing that, we will explore determinants of migration moves and destination choices. We will particularly focus on, first, the role of individual productivity-relevant resources and socio-demographic characteristics. This is the issue which has been explored in migration research many times. Now we would like to see how it works with regard to the Ukrainian refugees. The second issue is rather innovative. We will focus on the role of, as I call it, unobservable characteristics in connection to war-related political positions. So this, I have never seen it earlier, but it would be also interesting, I think, not only to look on the productivity characteristics, but also on political attitudes. And finally, we will also draw our attention on the destination-related characteristics when we discuss the destination choices, particularly of refugees abroad. Now, let me raise this issue of immigrant selectivity. It is a widely discussed issue in migration research and actually one of the key issues in migration and also integration research, as it has been increasingly shown that integration of immigrants is pretty much a function of their selectivity. So what do we know about immigrant selectivity? First of all, there is very, very extensive, particularly economic research showing that economic migrants tend to be favorably selected. What does it mean favorably selected? It means that they are chosen positively, that is high on characteristics related to their labor market success. So they tend to be young, they tend to be highly educated, then they tend to be motivated. The rate of selection, the extent to which immigrants are positively selected, depends on the relative returns to the skills on which they are selected and the cost of migration. So it's a kind of relation of the returns and costs of migration. Without going too much into detail in economic models, we can also say, and research has shown, that the selectivity depends actually on the rate of return to human capital in both origin and destination. So both countries matter and returns to skills matter for that issue. And in our research within ongoing, we have also shown that selectivity depends also on host country institutional and structural characteristics. But what about migrants? What about refugees? With regard to refugee selection, there is a less clear-cut pattern. On the one hand, the same economists who discuss the selection of economic immigrants tend to argue that we would rather observe reverse selection among refugees, not necessarily negative, but not that positive as among economic migrants. In more recent study, we also find support for that selection among refugees is not necessarily negative, also among the refugees. The argument is that in principle, better off individuals tend to flee, but risks of migration might outweigh potentially positive refugees' self-selection patterns. That is, positively selected refugees might be stopped by the higher risks of migration. We also find the evidence showing that selectivity profiles of refugees tend to vary depending on where they go. And the pattern is that those heading to more distant Western countries are more likely to be favorably selected. So let us check how this would look like among Ukrainians, and we can already give provide or raise some hypotheses that among Ukrainians we would rather expect not very negative patterns because the risks of migration, that is visa regulations, so on, have been not very high. And we also expect similar patterns that Ukrainian refugees heading to more distant countries would be more favorably selected. So let us see how it looks. Before showing you the results, let me give you some words about our data. The data was collected in the joint project 1UA. The data was collected via Meta, that is Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger. We targeted population of Ukrainians, people, that is people with Ukrainian citizenship, aged 18 plus. We cut the age actually upper limit to 80, who lived in Ukraine on February 23rd, 22. The advertisement with the survey were shown to profiles of individuals who stated Ukrainian and or Russian as their language and who lived in Ukraine, Czech Republic, Hungary, Germany, Italy, Moldova, the Netherlands, Poland, and Romania. So we targeted several countries. And on the figure to the right, you see those countries which we are targeted in bold. You can also see numbers used for our analysis. We had larger numbers in this survey, but not all questions were asked by all, answered by all people. So for the analysis I present today, these are our numbers. You can see actually that we have further countries and further cases. And these are the countries which were not targeted by Facebook advertisement, but they were shown, maybe forwarded by the friends of the friends. So we also have some snowball sampling. We cannot say much on those cases, but we can, I think, pretty much say that we target Facebook respondents, and the advertisement was in the Ukrainian language to avoid some misuse of the survey by maybe some Russian speakers or not necessarily Ukrainians. The survey started in the mid of July and ended in the mid of August. Interesting information maybe for those who want to also try such survey. A group of younger people answered the survey primarily on the Instagram, and 46 plus people answered the survey on Facebook. Okay, let me come to the results, and I would like to show you first the socio-demographic characteristics of our respondents. I showed the results separately for stayers, IDPs, internally displaced persons, and refugees, differentiating between refugees who headed to neighboring countries, so these 5 countries which I discussed in the middle, and those who went to more distant countries. So what you see, some selection on age. Stayers tend to be older, refugees tend to be somewhat younger, but the differences are not very large. We also see considerable female bias, which is obvious, particularly for refugees, but also among stayers, it looks like men have other things to do than answer our Facebook survey. As for marital status, we see considerable selection. We see obviously that people who are single and who are separated or widowed are the ones who are more likely to be refugees to leave Ukraine for abroad. And people who are married or staying in some sort of unmarried partnership are more likely to stay or to be IDPs. Interesting results we can also observe regarding the financial situation or level of education of the respondents. Regarding the financial situation, we see a very clear gradient that the better the financial situation of the respondents, the more they're likely to be found among refugees, particularly refugees going to distant countries. These refugees are more clearly the ones who have financial resources above average or also well above average. With regard to the level of education, we also see a clear-cut pattern. The higher the level of education, the more likely the people to be refugees, and particularly refugees to the distant countries. Here it's actually very interesting that IDPs are somewhat more educated than the refugees who are going to the neighboring countries. So we see here also some sort of self-selection. Overall, you can see that our sample might be biased towards highly educated people. We have like 50% with some sort of tertiary education, which actually, as I have checked, corresponds to the numbers in ESS, but we cannot exclude some positive selection of the respondents. And I'm looking at stayers in this regard. Okay. The analysis I will show you in the following will focus on 3 issues. First of all, we assume that the basic decision for a person experiencing war is whether to leave home or to stay. So it's a basic decision. And in some cases, I would say you have to run if you're, for example, somewhere in a very, very serious war zone. The second decision, so once you decided to leave, the decision is where to go. And we discuss here the decision where to resettle within Ukraine or to go abroad. And when we're looking at this decision-making, leave or where to leave, we will focus, and the results I will show you will focus mostly on the role of demographic, productivity relevant characteristics, and political positions. The third analysis, which I will show to you, is that given that person has taken a decision to live abroad, where to go, which country to select. And I think it's also one of the key questions of the selectivity researchers, how people decide upon the countries. And it has been many times shown that sometimes it depends on the earnings distribution of the countries. There are theories showing that the distance matter, unemployment rates, differences across countries matter. So we will look at this. And here we will, at least what I will show, we have more, but I will show today the role of social capital resources, that is connections, networks with other people, and the role of destination-specific characteristics, which is what is specific in the country of destination which attracts refugees. Okay, let me start. Yeah, first of all, should I stay or should I go? Yeah, this is the decision, to leave or to stay. And as I said, in some cases, if you live in Donbass, and a very, very hot region, you should run away. And this is what our data shows. But let me draw your attention to first to socio-demographic characteristics. Let me walk you through the table because you will have a number of similar tables to understand what I'm showing here. On the left, you see a number of characteristics which we will look at. The first decision is the second column, which is leave versus stay. This is the basic decision, should I stay or should I leave? The third column is the second decision. If you decided to leave, whether you go abroad or you resettle in Ukraine. So these are the decisions. The numbers in the columns represent the propensities to either leave or to go abroad. The positive number indicates that the group under question, that is, for example, here, female on the first line, has a higher propensity to leave versus stay. In other words, female are more likely to leave in a war situation. Furthermore, we can say that if women decided to leave, they are more likely to go abroad than men. Bold numbers indicate that these numbers that I show are statistically significant, which means they are meaningful in general, let's say. The second characteristic we are looking at is marital status. And we compare the statuses which are indicated here to the reference group, which is being single. What do we see in general? That singles and also separated, because you see that the number for separated and divorced is not bold, meaning not statistically different from the reference category single. So what we can say that singles and divorced or separated are more likely to leave than the rest. Moreover, singles are more likely also to go abroad. All the other groups, that is, those who are unmarried but live in the partnership, those who are married or those who are widowed are the ones who are more likely to stay, or if they decided to leave, to resettle within Ukraine. And finally, with regard to the number of children, we can see that the more children individuals have, the more likely they are to leave and to go abroad. For those who are maybe not very comfortable with the numbers, you can read the summary to the right, this is what I just said. Let us move to the productivity relevant characteristics, and I will show you three. First, the level of education. Second, financial situation in summer 2021, so prior to the war, prior to the full-scale war. And finally, employment situation in 21. Again, here, for the education, we compare various levels of education to the reference group, which is incomplete secondary education. And what we immediately notice is some positive educational gradient. The higher the level of education, the more likely people to leave. Furthermore, we can also notice for those who decided to leave, these are particularly highly educated. That is, people with master's degree or PhDs who go abroad. So we obviously see, as economists will say, positive selection on education for leavers, particularly leavers abroad. Financial situation plays the role. The better the financial situation prior to the full-scale war, the more likely people to leave. And if they decided to leave, they are more likely to go abroad. Whether people worked or not doesn't play a role for the decision to leave or to stay. And these things that I showed you regarding sociodemographics and productivity relevant characteristics, actually nothing particularly new, we know it for other groups. Now, this is a new stuff. So we ask our respondents about their attitudes in relation to the subject connected to the war. In Ukraine, there is a very strong discussion, and I would say still controversial discussion, how the Crimea and Donbass should be liberated. I think there is a consensus about liberation, but the way of liberation, particularly regarding Crimea, is still disputed. The question is whether Crimea and Donbass should be liberated via military intervention or via negotiation. So we ask our respondents this question, whether they would prefer military solution for Crimea and Donbass separately, and here I put it together, or peaceful, not peaceful solution, but peaceful negotiations. And what we see in our findings is the people, Ukrainians, who tend to favor a military solution regarding Crimea and Donbass are less likely to leave and to go abroad. So they stay in Ukraine. Those who are confident or more confident that Crimea and Donbass should be liberated by a military way, they tend to stay. We also asked people about the plans of joining NATO. Actually, it was prior that Ukraine really give the application for joining NATO. And we see here that leavers or those who went abroad are the ones who stronger insist on Ukrainian joining the NATO than the stayers. So we see some self-selection regarding the political attitudes, whether this is causal or whether it is a consequence of the decision to leave or stay. We cannot answer with the question. What we can say, we see systematic differences on political attitudes with regard to the way how to finish the war. Okay, let me summarize this part. We see that patterns of self-selection among Ukrainian IDPs and refugees on the individual level. So it's not random, we see the self-selection. We see it by demographic characteristic, and by the way, these patterns slightly deviate from the patterns attested to the economic migrants. Economic migrants are said to be more male, but it's not in our case, and we know why. It's by default that a man should stay in the Ukraine. We see the patterns similar to the patterns among economic migrants for the human capital characteristics, and finally, we see not a random self-selection regarding the political positions. Now, let me move to the second part of my presentation. They express reasons for leaving versus staying. What we did, we asked our respondents to indicate what were the main reasons for them to stay in the same house apartment in Ukraine, or to move to a different place in Ukraine as opposed to moving abroad, or for refugees to move to the current country of residence and not to another country. Yeah, so we gave them kind of indicate the main reason. There was a possibility to indicate as many reasons as possible. And here the answer was because of my family, because of my friends and acquaintances, because of a lot of other people from my country or region live there. So these are all social capital kind of characteristics. Because of the general economic situation, because of educational system, healthcare system, state and social welfare provided in a country. These are country characteristics. Then because of availability of accommodation and jobs, more practical reasons, because of feeling welcome, because I wanted to be close to Ukraine, because my husband or relative have to stay in Ukraine. And finally, it was a coincidence. Let us see the answers to this question. And I show them separately by stayers, IDPs, refugees in neighboring countries, refugees in distant countries. I indicated in bold the top 5 answers. And what we see for stayers, the top 5 answers are family, available accommodation, available jobs, feeling welcome, close or at home. So here we see a very, very strong connection to home, to place, family, and so on. IDPs, we see coincidence, family, accommodation, close to home, and family has to stay. Again, here it's more embeddedness into Ukraine and coincidence. We haven't seen so much coincidence for stayers. People who stay, they know that why they're staying. It's more coincidence for IDPs. Now for refugees. Refugees, we see that coincidence play a larger role, particularly for refugees heading to distant countries. But we also see for refugees choosing the neighboring countries, this is family, friends, accommodation, and being close to home, which is a main reason. For refugees going to distant countries, the top reason mentioned was welfare state provisions, followed by friends, coincidence, friends, family, and available accommodation. So we do see difference. There are different justification for the choices, and they are rather distinct. Now, in my final graphs, I would like to show you some variation across countries. So what we do here in this figure, we compare the answers of individuals in a country shown to the left compared to Poland. Poland is Poland is the country which took the largest number of refugees. So it's the majority or a big majority passed Poland while leaving Ukraine. So what we have here, all people are refugees here, and we compare refugees in Slovak Republic, Hungary, Romania, and so on to refugees to Poland. How often do they stay having family members and the decision, as a reason for leaving the country? The point shows us the deviation from the Polish average, and the line indicates how stable is this indicator. So the larger the line, the less confidence we have in this indicator. Basically, the larger lines are also pertaining to countries with smaller sample sizes, because then the indicators are not very stable. We have a lot of error while estimating. Okay, let me move to the results. And what we see here, that basically there are a couple of countries where family was really clearly shown to be the key reason for moving. And these are Israel and USA. Obviously, smaller number of cases, but a very, very strong indicator. Also, we see the same for Italy. And practically for US on Israel having family members actually was probably partially one of the preconditions of moving to these countries. So it was much easier to move to these countries. Italy has also very large Ukrainian diaspora, so many people who have chosen Italy thought of their relatives. Friends and acquaintance, here we see more variation. We see that for people moving to Germany, availability of friends and acquaintance was one of the reasons. But also there are some countries like Romania or Bulgaria where people didn't have neither family nor friends, but still selected this country. Now let me move to the country characteristics, which is a rather interesting issue because it has been contestedly discussed in the literature. Does it matter? Do immigrants really consider such things as economic situation in the country, welfare provision in the country? And what we see from these figures, obviously, yes. What we see, the key message here, that Western countries are more likely to be chosen because of the economic situation. Let's see the first graph, economic situation, and you see, for example, Canada and US, the numbers chosen for these countries deviate significantly and strongly from those were chosen by immigrants in Poland. So it's obviously clear that people who went to Canada and US state that economy was one of the reasons for them to choose. The same can be said for immigrants going to Netherlands, Germany, and partially to Czech Republic. You see that kind of the Eastern European countries clustered together. They're very similar to a Polish result. And Western European countries tend to deviate, particularly with regard to economy. We see also educational system is rated higher in these countries, health system rated higher in these countries, and welfare provision system rated significantly higher in these countries. And you can see Germany, for example, is a country which was top score exactly in welfare provisions. Israel, by the way, as well, but you see the uncertainty is very large here. Okay, let me summarize. So if we look at the justifications for individual choices, we see considerable variation. People justify staying at home largely by the concept of home. They attach to home. They have family who decided to stay home. They have available accommodations. They have jobs, and they state that they feel well only at home. So a strong connection to home. People choosing resettlement within Ukraine name largely family reasons, availability of accommodation, closeness to home, as well as coincidence for their choices. People leaving the country reasoned with the availability of welfare assistance, coincidence, a lot of coincidence there. Social contacts, both family and friends, and in some cases for neighboring countries, also closeness to home. Overall, and to conclude, we can say that social networks drive migration decisions. Many destinations were chosen due to social connections, either family or friends, less so by the people, because some abstract people, Ukrainians living there, but largely family and friends. Coincidence is more frequently named by leavers and actually more frequently named by refugees. And according to some preliminary additional analysis, which I have not shown here due to time restrictions, we can show that objective characteristics of selected foreign countries largely coincide with the express reasoning behind the choice of the destination countries. So people who go to countries with high GDP per capita are indeed the ones who express that for them economic situation in the country was important. Or people with high expenditures on immigrants select the country and state that being welcome in the country is important for them. Okay, I will stop here. Many thanks for your attention. I'm very much looking to your questions and the discussion. I will stop sharing. Svetlana, we cannot hear you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Professor Irina Kogan, for your very interesting and worthwhile presentation. And let me give you reactions, this one. And after the break, we will have questions. I have many questions to you. And now, time to Professor Karine Amit. Let me share again my screen. And as you can see here, I hope you can see here. Okay, yes. And now I would like to introduce Professor Karine Amit. Professor Karine Amit is the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration at the European Academic Center. She is the head also of the Migration and Demography section in the Israeli Sociological Association, and she also serves as a member of the Metropolis International Steering Committee. She is part of the International Research Group in Erasmus Plus program, MINTE. She will describe about it later in your presentation. Professor Karine Amit, the Zoom floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you see the presentation? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you very much, Irena. I think it was very, very interesting. And I'm going to talk about the decision-making process of immigrants and focus on Ukrainian refugees, but Olim, those who are coming under the law of return to Israel. And it's going to be different because I'm going to touch this subject looking at a different angle and using a different methodology. And I think that it will be interesting to see the differences between the studies. So as mentioned, the immigration decision-making process was quite explored among economic migrants. But still, if we look at the issue itself, although it's very significant to understand why people are leaving, there are many studies about selectivity, about characteristic, but less about the process itself. And I'm going to focus in my presentation on this process. And most of the studies looking at this process are focusing on economic migrants. I will start by showing you a model that is actually a model of consumer decision-making. And this model was applied in my previous study with my partner, Ilan Rees, a couple of years ago. We applied it to migration decision-making process, and we studied North American immigrants arriving to Israel using this process. And then I'll try to see how it can fit, if not, if yes, to refugees. So the model is very simple. It has 5 stages. The first stage is problem recognition. An immigrant, a person that is not satisfied with the place of current living is starting to think about leaving the place. And this is like an initial state of understanding that he or she has a problem. Then he starts, or she, to gather information. And this process can take a lot of time. And for example, when we studied North American immigrants, it took a couple of years actually to start thinking practically and gathering information about the option of migrating to another country, in this respect to Israel. And then there are also alternatives. Irena talked about different alternatives to stay and to be displaced in your own country, or to live to another country, to live to a distance. There are a lot of alternatives that immigrants must consider. And this is also part of this process that the immigrants undergo. And then we have the choice. And as I said, this process can take a couple of years. North American immigrants actually, well, the average was about 5 years, but it took them from 2 to 10 years to actually decide to come to Israel. And there is also the last stage is outcome evaluation, because people can think, okay, I had a problem. I came to a new country, but then maybe I still have a problem. Maybe another country is better. So we're talking about a dynamic process. So the fact that someone actually decided to leave the country for multiple reasons doesn't say that he actually will stay in this country for a couple of years, or maybe after a couple of years, he decides to go through this process again. So it's a circular process. So what about refugees? This, as I said, this is for immigrants that actually decided knowingly, they had the time to think, to rethink, and to consider migration. What about refugees? Is this process relevant for them? This is something that I wanted to address in my studies. And I started looking for information, and there are studies about the decision-making process that refugees are going through. but these studies are mainly ethnographic, and they talk about the journey. What is the process? What is the journey that these immigrants go through? So I looked, of course, at these studies, but I didn't find enough academic emphasis in these studies on the decision-making process itself. And I was also interested in identity and belonging issues. And it was very interesting to hear about the homeless sensation that Irena mentioned. I will try to refer to it in a minute. So why did I think about it at all? Oh, sorry. I'm back. It's okay? Okay. So a couple of months ago, on March 2022, we went with a delegation of researchers, some of them are here, to Poland, and we visited reception centers for Ukrainian refugees. And then while asking immigrants, refugees staying in these reception centers, why did you leave? What were the circumstances at all? We actually said that something is very interesting about these immigrants. Some of them talked about the coincidence, the fact that they had to decide very fast about this movement, and the fact that they are still in the midst of a decision-making process. Some of them did not know what is next, what they are going to do. So I started to think about this process and said it is very important to further examine it and to test it in Israel. So this was the first trigger to the research. So what about Israel? Irena showed figures about all the Ukrainian immigrants around the neighboring countries, but we are talking about something quite different, even in the numbers. If we look at the total number of immigrants entering Israel under the law of return, we call them olim, we can see that these are the numbers. And last year, and actually it's not last year, it's this year, and the number is still growing. While the war between Russia and Ukraine is happening, we can see that the increase is very significant. And the exact numbers of the two main groups that are related to the war are about 14,000 immigrants, olim, that entered from Ukraine, and about more than 30,000 immigrants coming from Russia. I'm going to focus in my presentation on Ukrainian because we can discuss them and we can perceive them more as refugees because the connection to the war and the fact that they flee the war is more significant. So what are my research aims? First of all, I would like to describe the migration decision-making process of the Ukrainian refugees arriving after the war. I would like to focus on identity and belonging factors in this process, but not only on them, but these are part of the process. And I think that it is important to contribute to policymakers, to the planning and the first absorption stages of Ukrainian refugees arriving to Israel. So what did I do? And I'm talking here about preliminary result, and it's actually a first study that I'm conducting. I started by conducting 20 semi-structured interviews with refugees who arrived to Israel just after the war. It is important to emphasize that these immigrants were interviewed during the first 2 months after their arrival in Israel. So we actually wanted to document the process of the first steps in Israel and not focus on what is happening actually in Israel, but more about what happened during the process of deciding and arriving to Israel. We interviewed them while they were living in hotels operated by the Jewish agency and by municipality, or just after they left this hotel. Most of the immigrants stayed there for a month or two. So I will present main themes that came out of these findings. First of all, the first theme is not surprising, although there were early signs that the war is going to happen. And in Israel, for example, some of the organization called people with a Jewish background and told them, people in Ukraine, please come to Israel. The situation is not safe. People were quite surprised, and they had to take a very fast, quick decision to immigrate. For them, like many said, it was like a thunderbolt on a clear day. So I'll show you a couple of citations from the interviews. This is a 33-year-old interviewee, divorced +3. She lived in Kiev before immigrating, and she has a bachelor degree. Actually, the fact that we did it, it's not a statistical examination, but most of the interviewees had a BA at least degree. And if we're talking about selectivity, maybe this is also stressed in our findings. So she says that until the end, I didn't believe that anything would happen. I didn't even prepare an emergency bag for me and the children. And she goes on and says that on the day that the war started, on February 24, she actually wanted to send her kids to the kindergarten, but the kindergarten teacher called her and said, hey, you can't send your kid, the war has started. So it was very surprising for them. The second theme is related to coincidence. We actually, in the reception centers in Poland, we really sense the fact that people decided without thinking very much about where to go, why they went, etc. In Israel, in the interviews, it was apparent, but not in all the interviews. I will give you here an example. This is a 49-year-old interviewee, married +1. She lived in Odessa before immigrating. And she says the following: there were two options for us, Germany and Israel. We started gathering information, but it wasn't easy. And here she says, my daughter saw an ad directing people to buses heading to Germany, but we missed the bus. So we started inquiring about Israel. So we can see that if the bus was there, maybe they will eventually reach Germany and not Israel. And this is something that we have to think about it. And it is quite amazing that we're talking about really coincidence in this process. And now let's talk about why Israel and why did they decide eventually to arrive to Israel. And we can see that although most of the interviewees did not actually consider and thought very thoroughly about leaving Ukraine before and about leaving Israel, about arriving to Israel, some of them started to gather information and to look at their documents proving that they are eligible to make Aliyah, to come to Israel. They are entitled to enter under the law of return. Some of them even started to do it while the COVID-19 crisis was very apparent. So they started thinking about options. And we can see that it was important to them. So they were, in a sense, prepared for this immigration, although they didn't actually think to do it. And here is a 37-year-old interviewee who lived before in Kherson. And we can see that she said the following. I have a birth certificate that states that both mother and father are Jewish. This is the only thing I took with me to Israel. She has a bachelor degree. She didn't take her diplomas, but she did take all the documents that are actually proving that she is eligible to make Aliyah. Okay, so what is the role of Israel in Jewish organization and also family members in Israel? And Irena talked about social connection. This is something that is also very apparent in my preliminary findings. And here, for example, this is in one of the reception centers that we visited right near the border in Poland. This is a representative of the Joint, but throughout the way, they met, the refugees met in representative of Israel in Jewish organization. And as well, some of them had family members, sometimes in Germany, in Israel, in other countries, and not just in Israel. So 41-year-old and married +3 who lived in Litopol before, and he's a teacher and he has a master's degree. And what he says here is, in Lviv, we met representatives of the Jewish agency who helped me and my daughters to get to Poland. And the fact that these organizations arrange accommodation, arrange the transfer and everything was very helpful for them. In addition, he said that he has a sister in Germany but my mother immigrated to Israel and she insisted. So sometimes you had multiple connection in multiple countries, not necessarily just in one country. And it is very interesting to see how eventually the family arrived to Israel. And now let's talk about feeling of at home and identity and belonging. And one of the things that the refugee lacks is home, okay? We're talking about the fact that some of them actually, their home was bombarded and nothing was left from it. So we noticed that from the interviews that the involvement of Jewish organization is beyond the administrative care and concern for sheltered accommodation. For some of the immigrants, the fact that someone actually invited them to come to their home and talked about Israel as a home was very important for them, and the feeling of acceptance and homeliness was also very important for these immigrants. And here is one of the immigrants, actually a 38-year-old immigrant who lived with his family in Odessa before arriving, and he's a dentist, and he says the following: "They told us, relax, everything is fine, relax, you are at home now. We will take care of you." So the fact that they didn't accept this, and as refugees throughout their throughout the journey, they didn't feel that someone actually is helping them so much, and the fact that they got this help was very important for them. So let me summarize the first insights from these preliminary results and talk about my future plans related to it. So first of all, we can see the decision time is very fast. We looked at the model at the beginning of my presentation, and it's the stage one. There is a problem. You don't have a lot of time to think about this problem. You have to leave right away. In addition, the fact that chance, coincidence is involved in this process is very interesting. There is limited information. Information is a key element in this process. Well, you don't have a lot of information, you can take decision just like that. In addition, in the Israeli case, at least, we saw that there were preliminary examination of immigration or aliyah eligibility. So sometimes you didn't actually think to leave, but to be on the safe side, you gathered information and you did all the administrative checks before actually deciding to immigrate. And we also noticed that the role of organization connected to the destination country and family members, in this case in Israel, is very important. So what is next? First of all, I have to finish the data collection for the qualitative part. I want to complete it with some additional interviews. I also have a higher representation of women, but this is also due to the fact that more women refugees arrived because of the restrictions in Ukraine. I would like to administer a survey among newly arrived immigrants and refugees from Ukraine and add those coming from Russia and see if there is a difference between these two groups that many of them came following the war, but the conditions in each country's origin country is very different. And finally, about to start a comparative study with my partners in the MINTE project. I will talk about it in a minute. And to do the same, to interview immigrants, refugees in Poland, in the Czech Republic, and try to understand whether the process is similar, different, and what can we learn from the experience in other countries. Now, the MINTE project is Migrant Integration Through Education. We just started it in September 2022 with a couple of partners from Poland, the Czech Republic, and we have also an additional partner from Belgium, from the European Commission. And this project is actually not aimed to examine the decision-making process. This is another study that we're conducting together, but the focus of this project is on information and digital competencies of immigrants. And this is something that we're just starting. I just came back from Kiev last week, and this from Krakow last week, and this is something that we are actually starting to do. And that's all for me. And if you have questions, of course, Sveta will handle that. Thank you. We can't hear you, Svetlana.
Thank you, Karine, for your very interesting again and worthwhile presentation. One moment, I would like to give you my reactions like Irena. This one. Thank you to both of you, Irena and Karine. The two lectures complement each other. And now we will take a short break, 7 minutes. We will return at 12:10 and we will open the discussion panel. So we will see, I would like to see all of you at 12:10. So see you later. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for returning to us after the break. Now we will start our questions and answers panel, and you're welcome to answer questions. And let me check our chat. And please, if you want to answer the questions, if you want to ask questions, please raise hand using a toolbar if you want. And let me do we have questions from our audience? ותרגישו בנוח לשאול שאלות גם בעברית. הדיון יכול להתקיים גם בעברית וגם באנגלית. תרגישו בנוח לשאול שאלות. אז אני כרגע בודקת את הצ'אט. And now, you know what? I would like to ask questions to both of you, Professor Irena Kogan and Professor Karine Amit. According to your findings, what steps may be taken to facilitate decision-making process among refugees? Irena, can you say a few words about it?
Yeah, I can start. I think probably Karine could tell more from her in-depth interviews. I can only make some I can have some indication from the data we have. So what we can see in our data is that individuals rely very much on social contacts, which also implies relying on social media and things like that. So they are in a position to gain some information, a lot of information, actually through social contacts. We haven't really asked about the role of agencies or the role of organization in providing information, so I cannot tell more on that. But we can obviously see from our findings that respondents are pretty much aware of the relevant characteristics of the countries. And in some, as I said, additional analysis, we could also check whether the justification for the choice of a destination based on those institutions coincide with actual institution as measured by some objective indicators, and it largely does. So basically, we can say that through the information they get via social networks and other sources, about which I cannot tell much, they are in a position to gain information. It's just that a lot of decisions are taken under a lot of uncertainty, and that's why those coincidence decisions take place. But I will pass to Amit, Karine, who obviously asks such questions and would know more.
Thank you. And then I see that Anastasia is raising her hand, so she'll be next. This is exactly what we're trying to further examine in the Minter project, which is based on information issues. So this is a key element. The fact that some of these immigrants, it's not just the information, is whether I'm trusting this information, because and I think that the fact that you trust more information, you trust more information that is from your relatives and people that you know, than if it's an official organization trying to convince you to come to the country. So we are actually in the midst of this investigation. What kind of information are more reliable among these refugees, and how can countries facilitate, sometimes through municipalities and other places, because we didn't talk about it, but you can decide to come to Poland and then to move to another place in Poland. It's also, the city is also important in this process. So definitely social contacts are important. Anastasia?
Thank you very much, Karine. Anastasia, Professor Anastasia Gorodetsky, Tel Aviv University.
I have two questions, one to Karine and another for Rena. And I'm thinking about this issue of belongingness and feeling home, you know, and this Jewish agency that provide this kind of feeling. And then people come, yeah, so they could come with the let's say, dry knowledge about the country's educational economical system, and then, knowing the law of return, but with the kind of scholastic decision, you know, without this attachment and belonging. But once this Jewish agency work with the people and explain them and let them, you are coming home, they come with the expectations. And then they come from with the expectation, but at the time they came here, they would realize that their belongingness on this Jewish path would be constantly questioned and challenged, and something that could be comforting then became actually it's like a backlash, because they already raised this expectation, but they didn't raise expectation to come to the country where their belongingness would be questioned constantly, and with the tension between the law of return and the Jewish definition of the Jewishness and the halacha. So it at some point, the advantage would become actually a disadvantage in this decision-making process and in the rise of the expectation. This is for you, and one for Rena. You talked about selection and selectivity, and some of the participants asked it when you were discussing, they was thinking about it. To what extent this selection actually, it's not self-selection, it's something that was created by the situation in Ukraine in terms of who can leave, who cannot leave, where the men could leave, something that related to the country itself. I do not know if, for example, physicians could leave, even if they women, I do not know, I'm asking, I do not have this knowledge, but to what extent it was actually constructed and structured to some point, by authority of the country of origin, and not by what economists would call self-selection.
So I will start. First of all, you're right. This is exactly one of the problems that you offer a sense of belonging. You say you're part of us, it's your home. And then after a couple of years, even less, when they want to get married, when they want other things, they will actually realize that it's not like that. And in the previous study that I examined the tendency to leave Israel, one of the factors that actually predicted the tendency to leave was the Jewish identity, which is actually questioned. So if we have policymakers here or representatives of organization, it's very important to understand that such decision, whether to change the law of return or to do things like that, it has implication on the sense of the sense of belonging, not only of those newly arrived immigrants, but of many of those who are supposed to come and those who are here for years. And I believe that you know that during while we're talking about the winter, there is now they're talking about another wave of refugees that is about to come to Europe, and I believe that to Israel as well. But are we really? Do we really want them to come? If we want them to come, we have to be honest about their position here in Israel. They are citizens, but still, we don't want them to feel that they are citizens, not as all other citizens of Israel.
Like, as you said, and if you want people to come, we also know on one hand, country wants people to come. On the other hand, I guess even for the Jewish immigrant country, kind of compete now with Europe also because they can go to other places.
Other places, that's right.
Their families members would be accepted and not.
Mm-hmm. So it will be also interesting to see Russian immigrants because they are less accepted in other places, and to see if there is a difference in this respect as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you, Anastasia, for your question. I think it's a very relevant one. We see indeed here in terms of selection, and that's why it's self-selection plus selection. We see two forces operating. Obviously, with regard to socio-demographic, particularly demographic characteristic, we see that the restrictions upon exit kick in. So we see few women, and it's not only because women participate in this Facebook survey, and also have more time probably, but it's also indeed the reflection of the decision taken by Ukrainian government to keep men within the country. We also see that probably in some sort of age distribution, we see, as we say, we have the survey, it's actually for 18 plus, but in the first pages, we could see more people. And at some point, we just continue with the survey, with the selected ones. So we see a lot of younger, somewhat younger, not like 16, 17 years old, who participated and who were abroad. So we do see these selection processes, obviously. But we also see some self-selection. I think this educational gradient, it's obviously some sort of self-selection. Financial resources is a self-selection, and it's much in line with what we see with other economic migrants. I think another way to further dig deeper into this issue would be to further explore our data, and the data allows us to do that, as we have about 40% of immigrants, they had transit countries before they came to the destination we observed. And if I may, can I shortly share my screen? I will show some numbers, yes, because I think
you can share again.
Just very quickly.
No problem. We have time.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. I have here some. Yeah, this slide I will show you. Yeah, so this is just coming. The slide coming shows us.
Irena, sorry. Now it's the last slide, please. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So
yeah.
sorry.
Here we go. Yeah. So as you see here, I show you the numbers for 4 countries: Germany, Netherlands, Italy, and Czech Republic. So these are Western countries, and you see that we have like certain proportion of people who went directly. And it's very high in Czech Republic. It has some history. A lot of Czech Republic has a lot of connections, both with Russia and Ukraine. A lot of people live in there. So you see 80% went straight. We have much lower numbers for the Netherlands. It's just below 60% who went straight to the Netherlands, but not directly. There was like more than 40%. In Germany, this was 30%. Italy was slightly more than 30%. And in the lower part of the table, you see where these people, what were the transit countries of these people? Obviously, Poland, as we know, Poland was the transit country for almost all of them. But we also see that some proportion stayed in Ukraine for some time and then went. We see also other countries, and it differs across the country. So what I think we can learn here, if we dig deeper here, we could learn actually more on kind of decision making. This was not considered accidental kind of exit, people made some decision making. They were changing their destinations, and I think it's a dynamic process. If you follow discussions in some Facebook groups or whatever, which I'm trying to follow to get an impression of what people are talking about, you very often see questions. What are the regulations in one country or another? If I want to move from one country to another, how easy it is. So there is a lot of decision making going on. And I think the secondary decision making is more likely to be even further based on some selective mechanisms.
Thank you, Irena. And now, please, Sophia Tupolev, please, if you want to ask questions, please introduce yourself, first of all, and then ask the question, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm participating from my car, but I am parked, so safe. Thank you for two very interesting talks, and I learned a lot listening to the conversation this morning. I'm Sophia Tupolev. I'm the founder of a social movement and volunteer group called the Reboot Startup Nation. We started in February of this year as a response to the Ukraine war, and we run a community of about almost 13,000 Russian-speaking job seekers in Israel. And we help people that were displaced by the war, either by the war in Ukraine or for political reasons in Russia, to get into high tech. So that's where we're looking. And so I'm actually interested to ask if now or if later anybody wants to talk to me about the decision-making process in terms of, are they thinking about their employment and restarting their career? Or are they only thinking about, in those decision-making moments, are they only thinking about the urgency of needing to leave? Because when we started our organization, we said, okay, everybody's looking at humanitarian aid. Everybody's doing frontline, the most important, obviously, life-saving work. But we said nobody in February and March was talking about, well, what will they do when they get here? And I'm an immigrant. I'm a child of immigrants, and I live in Israel. And we know that in different waves of Aliyah and immigration here, they weren't so successful. We had physicists becoming non-skilled workers and all sorts of stories that you all know. We wanted to prevent that. And I would love to either now or later hear more about what if anyone has anything to say on that part of the decision-making process, why they choose the countries they do, if the professional future that it holds for them has a role in that.
Thank you, Sophia, for really very interesting and important question. Maybe somebody from our audience, or Irena or Karine, would you say something about it?
Yes, I would like to say something, if I may.
Oh, great.
And I would like to share the screen again because I have some data.
We have a brilliant presentation.
No, it's actually a slide which I kicked out of the presentation for the sake of time, but I will show it. Sorry, let me check whether it's the right one. And I think no, that's not the right one. Sorry. Yeah, this one. Okay. Just a moment, and I just while I'm searching for the slide, I will give you an information that in our survey we are continuing our survey. We have a second wave in which we can you see the slide now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I won't go to the full screen because
okay, no problem.
It's a short slide. So we continue in the second survey. We're asking exactly about the labor market situation, focusing on such questions as how whether they are looking for a job, whether they get their credential recognized, whether they kind of started work. So it's a labor market part. Unfortunately, the problem is, and we're questioning people both in Ukraine and in various countries. Unfortunately, with the whole energy cards and all the things going on in Ukraine, we're losing a lot of respondents. It's terrible, obviously, but we'll see what we can get out of it. But in this survey, which is the data that I showed to you, we also asked the question whether they have chosen the destination based on availability of accommodation and available jobs. So I think this is the question which you are talking about, whether people are thinking about employment while moving. And again, what we see here, we do see variations. So we obviously see that people do think about jobs. But interestingly enough, when we saw regarding thinking about the economy, we saw a pattern that people who moved to the Western countries named economy as a reason or as some sort of justification. But if we see at this figure on jobs, we do not see that Western countries are particularly strong. When people tick the box, they were looking at the availability of jobs. Interestingly, Canada and Israel were such a country. So we see here, again, as I said, the survey didn't target Canada and Israel, but it's reflected by the confidence intervals. But it's a positive. It's much stronger people who are in Canada, Israel, interestingly enough, also Baltic countries and Hungary, and also Romania to some degree, and Czech Republic. So they thought about the jobs. So apparently this is an issue. And we see this some sort of thinking. It's interestingly accommodation. We saw much less thinking. Although in some countries, in Eastern European countries, they also thought whether accommodation is available. So they also people do, and I will stop sharing. People do think about such issues, and I think it's pretty much important that some organization or country institutions or informational campaigns provide further information, and like information how to get credentials recognized, what courses to join. At least I can tell about Germany, there is an obligatory so-called integration courses. It's a language course plus other courses where all people have to participate if they get the status. And there is a career guidance and things like that.
Thank you, Irena. Anastasia?
Yeah, just a short comment to this conversation. Irena, if you remember your slides before, it's interesting because the Western countries, the Germany, Austria, Netherlands, you could see there they were chosen for the welfare. Not only Western, but also Western with the good welfare system. But the countries as Israel, maybe US, I don't know, Baltic country, without welfare system, maybe the strong welfare system, were chosen for the job availability. This is kind of, it's really, but you could see a little bit connection between the preference of the country by the welfare system and by availability of the job. I do have to say that from research that see economic migration to the European countries, one of the reasons and the changes in this migration through the years, it was until 2010, the data then, I'm sure you know this research. Let's say the main reason for people to come is actually not the welfare system, but the low level of unemployment. But this is when we talk about economic migrants. The low level of unemployment, this is one of the most driver for people to come. Maybe things change, I don't know.
Thank you, Anastasia, for your comment. And we also have one question. We have also questions from our chat. For example, from Jewish Agency for Israeli. Please, if you want to ask questions. Max, do you want to ask questions about האם לקחתם בחשבון שגברים פשוט לא יכולים לצאת? It's maybe to you, Irena, have you considered that men in Ukraine had to be mobilized? Please unmute yourself, Irena.
Yeah, sure. We are aware of that, and that's why actually, if presenting the results of the survey, we are basically speaking about female population. I might also drop all men in our analysis as well, because I think this is one of the reasons we cannot extrapolate for the male population due to obvious reasons. That's why I totally take in point people, men, majority, vast majority cannot leave. And that's why the results are obviously valid for the female population.
Thank you, Irena. And now I look at our time, and do we have more questions? Please raise your hand if you want to ask questions.
I would just want to comment to Sophia that I will gladly be in touch with her if she hears me, because I can't see the picture. Here, she is with me. So as part of our Minter project is really dedicated to information, and it's also information related to the labor market. I will really happily speak with you and learn what you do in your organization.
Amazing. Thank you. I would love to speak with you after.
So we can leave your email even in the chat, and then I'll copy it.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat, and anyone who would like to reach out to me, please do.
Great.
And we have more questions, and now I think that the time to end our meeting. And I would like to thank all of you being with us. I hope that it was very interesting and worthwhile to all of you. And I want to thank our simultaneous translators, Judith and Shlomit. Thank you very much. אני רוצה להודות במיוחד למתורגמנות שלנו. And of course, I would like to thank to our two keynote speakers, Professor Irena Kogan and Professor Karine Amit, and of course, our Zoom participants from different countries, Poland, Germany, Israel, England. Thank you for being with us today. And of course, our participants from Israel. תודה רבה לכולכם על מה שראיתם והשתתפתם. And also you can visit our website of our institute, the Institute for Immigration and Social Integration. As you can see here from the slide, you can also contact with us. You can see email and write if you have questions. And see you next time in our next webinar. And also I would like to switch to into Hebrew. אתם גם מוזמנים, אם אתם רוצים, להירשם לתוכנית המוסמך בהגירה ושילוב חברתי שלנו ברופין. If you want, you also welcome to register to our MA program in Immigration and Social Integration at the Rupin Academic Center. And the details will be now in our chat. אז תודה רבה לכולכם. תודה רבה מקרב לב לאירנה. לפרופסור אירנה קוגן, לפרופסור קרין עמית, אבל בסוף אני אוכל לומר גם לאירנה ולקרין. תודה רבה לכולכם.
תודה סווטה על כל הארגון.
תודה רבה סווטה.
תודה רבה.
אני מקווה שהיה לכם מעניין.
ממש.
תודה רבה לכם.
תודה.
תודה.
ביי ביי.
תודה רבה.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.